Stagg 25B. Buffalo Trace ain't stopping. C and D have already been released on the East Coast. Washington hasn't quite caught up yet, but I just picked up the B batch. We recently did 25A, so let's do another 2-Minute Tuesday and get the notes on 25B and decide whether or not we would rather have 25B or 25A. Cork pop. Solid. Now, I got this through a friend because he's been on an absolute heater finding Staggs, and I haven't found any myself personally. But I did get this at MSRP, courtesy of a grocery store, so after taxes it cost me right about $100. Washington taxes suck, I know, but I'm happy to pay $100 for a Stagg. Now, as we know, Buffalo Trace has been really increasing the number of Staggs available. I feel like it's becoming more and more available, and I know. I'm going to hear from some of you who are even really good friends of mine, and be like, we don't ever see Stagg in my state. I know. Buffalo Trace does some really weird, and honestly, I wish they would stop doing this, but games where they create artificial scarcity. So like as an example, in certain states, it's almost impossible to find Eagle Rare. In my state, it's pretty easy. There are big waves of it that come out several times a year, and you're almost guaranteed to be able to walk out with a case of it pretty easily if you want to, out of a grocery store. But we never see Weller Green Label for some reason. So there's little things that Buffalo Trace likes to do, and certain states find way more of other things than this and that, and it's just dumb. Equally distribute your product, Buffalo Trace. People want it. You've got plenty of it. Obviously, you're making 4 batches of Stagg a year now instead of 2 like you used to. Let's just get on this and do it right. With that little rant being over, let's get into our 2-Minute Tuesday and get the notes on Stagg 25D. As always, we start with color, and I feel like at this point we should stop, but it's a pretty typical bourbon color. This is what you would expect out of a Stagg. Let's get into viscosity. Hopefully you can see lots of little legs starting to form. Looks like it's got pretty good viscosity, and we should expect that at 126.9 proof. Let's get into the nose. And the nose, the first thing I get out of this, a little bit of cherry cola vibes. Batch 18 had big cherry cola vibes. That's one of my favorite batches ever. It's not quite as heavy on the cherry as batch 18 was, but there is a good kind of cola-y note in there. There's a really nice sweetness, brown sugary, not quite as deep as like molasses, but not your confectionery kind of sugar. There is a little bit of cherry. There's also definitely some oak presence. And you don't really expect a ton. You don't expect this like ridiculous complex thing out of Stagg. But when you get 2 or 3 really big punchy notes, that's pretty standard for your Staggs. They're gonna be in your face, give you a couple of experiences, kind of clean your clock a little. So with that being said, let's see how it shows up on the palate. I'm not getting as much cola as I would have thought compared to the nose. What I am getting is a bit of kind of leather and tobacco. Not usually the things I get out of a Stagg, but the good news, there's that cherry and a little bit of vanilla hiding in the back, and it comes more toward the mid and finish portions of the palate. Up front, it's a little more savory. That sweetness comes in a little bit later. There is kind of a brown sugary binging on caramel thing throughout the whole thing, but it's really muted and subtle compared to that big kind of in-your-face tobacco-y and leathery note, and it's mostly that leather. The tobacco is a little bit more underneath, but it's more present than, say, any of the sweet notes until you get to the mid and finish portions of the palate. This thing is 126.9 proof. It's got a little bit of an oomph to it, but it's not super ethanol-y. It gives you a good Kentucky hug, and it lingers pretty well, and when you do get into the finish, there's a nice little bit of influence from the barrel char and the oak there, but that's really where a lot of the sweetness starts settling in, which normally, for Staggs, the sweetness is up front, and those savory notes come in toward the finish. It's a little different. So let's get into an overall score for Stagg 25B. I'm giving this batch of Stagg a 78. Just a touch under the 25A. And let me explain why. If you are more of a savory bourbon drinker, and you don't like the more sweet forward bourbons, you might actually prefer this batch over the 25A. But for me, the 25A had a bit more fruitiness, and it kind of had that like cream soda meets cola thing going on, and I really liked that. For me, the best Staggs usually have some strong fruity notes, just a touch of sweetness. They don't have to be crazy sweet, and then they're definitely going to manhandle you some. Now, this is manhandling you, but it's kind of doing it in the opposite way that most Staggs usually do. It's very savory up front, that kind of leather and tobacco, just a hint of sweetness. And then as you get toward the mid and finish, that's where that real like fruitness comes in, a little bit of vanilla, but it's not as strong and prevalent as some of the Staggs that usually hit my palate really well. Kind of unfortunate, because on the O's it had a nice cherry cola thing going on, and that cola was barely there until you start getting toward the finish. That's why I'm rating it the way I'm rating it. Is it so good? Yes. Should you hunt 25B instead of 25A or some of the other batches? It depends. Right, this is the ever-present argument. I feel like just universally saying yes or no is wrong. If you prefer a little less fruit in your whiskey, 25B is probably going to be more up your alley. If you want something that's a bit more fruit and sweet forward, you might want to look for 25A. Now granted, we haven't seen C and D yet, so who knows where they're going to land. Last year, my favorite was 24D, followed by 24B, then 24A, and then on the very bottom was like 24C. And this year's already shaping up to be a little different. 25A was hitting my palate a little bit better for the notes that I tend to prefer out of a Stagg. 25B is still good, do not get me wrong, and a 78 is a strong score for something that is reasonably available. I know, again, some of you are going to play, I've never seen a Stagg ever unless it was $500. I get it. Here's the real question. If the national secondary is about $150 on a Stagg, so we're getting closer and closer to MSRP at Washington pricing, at least because of our taxes, is it worth tracking down at secondary? I think it depends on how comfortable you are spending that much money on a bottle of whiskey. If you're someone who really loves Stagg and you're kind of like me where you feel like you just have to have one of everything you can possibly acquire, and you want to compare them all to each other, then maybe that secondary price is worth it if it's almost impossible for you to find a Stagg in your local market. But with the rate at which more and more Stagg is coming out, and we're getting more batches and higher quantities, so we're seeing more and more of this around, I think paying full secondary is not worth it. I bet for most of you, you can negotiate the price on these down, or you're going to see them sit on shelves a bit longer for those of you who encounter these at like the museum quality stores, right? We all know they're out there because there's a lot more Stagg floating around in the last 2 years, and they're really not selling at those crazy prices anymore. So you might have an opportunity to bring this down a bit in price and get yourself a Stagg if you've previously been missing them. That's it. That is my review for Stagg 25B, just a touch under 25A, but still overall a fairly good whiskey. Let me know in the comments down below. Have you had the most recent Stagg? Maybe you've had 25B, 25C, and even possibly the new 25D that just came out on the East Coast. I want to hear from you in the comments down below. What's been your favorite so far? Have you gotten to try this? Are your notes completely different than mine, Bentley? You're crazy, and you're a fool, probably. If you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing. At 1,000 subscribers, I'm going to give away a bottle of H. Taylor Single Barrel and an H. Taylor Small Batch, plus a few other little extras. And that's like literally that like, comment, subscribe. Those three things are the best ways to tell old Papa YouTube, hey, I like what this person is doing, and someone else might too. It helps grow our channels for all of us small whiskey creators who are still trying to do this game, and prevents us from doing dumb sponsorships like mattresses or pre-alcohol supplements you don't actually need. Just drink water. Just drink water, maybe some electrolytes, okay? You'll be fine. As always, my friends, thank you so much for watching, and stay awesome.